Welcome to all C3RF members and friends throughout the nation, indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the folks at Veterans for Freedom as they watch this special edition of C3RF in Hot. Today should be of great interest to all as it delves into the incredible case of Ottawa Police Service Detective Helen Grus. Detective Grus, a 20-year veteran with an impeccable record, was a member of the sexual assault and child abuse section of the police force when she became aware of a cluster of 9 infant deaths in temporal proximity to the COVID vaccine rollout and the adverse event data linking that rollout with mother-infant complications. Detective Grus would launch an investigation, would find herself investigated herself for discreditable conduct as a result. Nearly 3 years later, she is still undergoing disciplinary proceedings by the Ottawa Police Service with her career at stake. Today, we roll in on our case with an expert wingman in the form of Detective Donald Best, retired, who has been following the Grus case and all of its proceedings. By way of introduction, his write-up for the Ontario Civil Liberties Association Civil Liberties Award of 2018 is instructive, I think. It stated that former Toronto Police Sergeant Detective Best was responsible for investigating Canadian police, lawyers, and politicians involved in organized crime, and was a leading Canadian anti-corruption whistleblower and activist. In his ongoing legal cases and public advocacy, Mr. Best exposed corruption in the Canadian legal profession, including secret orders and investigations by judges, the submission of false evidence in court by lawyers, and the failure of disciplinary bodies such as the Law Society of Ontario and the Canadian Judicial Council to investigate complaints against judges and lawyers. Mr. Best's tireless efforts to create integrity and accountability in the Canadian legal system make him an exemplary leader in the fight for equality before and under the law of all Canadians and for all Canadians, including self-represented litigants. Welcome, Donald Best, to the session of In Hot. It certainly is an honor to have you here with us to discuss what many call the persecution of Detective Helen Grus. Can we start with how this seasoned professional found herself in this predicament?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Russ. The story of Ottawa Police Detective Helen Grus is just incredible. And, those of us who are in law enforcement or in the law and the courts, it just don't believe it. But here we are. It is uh, a trial and an investigation that has been tainted with misconduct, conflicts of interest, nepotism, bias that plagues the prosecution and the police who are persecuting Detective Helen Grus. It's really undermining the integrity of the Ottawa Police internal justice system that they have, this particular case. So Detective Helen Grus is a well-respected 20-year veteran with the Ottawa Police Service. Now, she's done well, and she has been seconded to many of the very high-level squads, including SACA, sexual assault and child abuse. Russ, that kind of work is very difficult, and only the best of the best get into squads like that, like homicide. And in fact, they do investigate sudden infant deaths outside of hospitals. They are the first ones to go in, often side, but they go in. They are specialists in it. And Detective Grus was one of the best. She was a training officer, many successful cases, and she was praised in the newspapers. Interesting, one of her cases was very similar to the one that she's now being charged for, in that she had just a suspicion that something was wrong. And she looked into the internal files of the Ottawa Police Service, which any police officer is able to do. This is part of their job, looking for clues, looking for trends. And what happened was she put together a case against a man who had done a sexual assault of a child many years previously. She brought that forward. The man was convicted and sentenced, and that was done on her own volition. That was just like any other police officer across this country. There's thousands of investigations launched every day. Every time a police officer drives down the street and they see something on the corner, that could be the start of an investigation. That's just the way it works. And so what Detective Grus did was back in 2021 in the fall, she started noticing, and her squad started noticing, a cluster of unexplained infant deaths. Now, this was uh, coincided with the rollout of the COVID vaccines.
Yes.
So naturally, Detective Bruce was curious about that. And so what happened is she suspected that some of the deceased newborns and breastfeeding infants, six in total within a very brief period, might have been harmed by the mother's COVID vaccination. And she uncovered that adverse events listed in Pfizer's clinical medical trial corresponded to the circumstances surrounding these six infant deaths. That's really something. That's really important.
So
And
she
among
wasn't,
those cases,
so
go
Donald,
ahead.
she wasn't winging it. She was going on the basis of solid evidence before she proceeded.
Well, it's like everything else. Every investigation starts with a little curiosity, and I wonder, what's that guy do standing on the corner? He's been there every Tuesday. Why is that barbershop open at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning? Oh, it's a crap game. You know, you so she did, and she noticed this trend with her squad. Don't forget her squad noticed this trend too. But
Yeah.
then she wondered what it was. So she started looking into the vaccines because it was just one of the things that one would consider. And she found that six of these deaths were suspicious in that they were recorded that the symptoms of the death was the same as some as of. She's very curious, and then so she's curious about the link between the vaccines and the potential that it could be infants who died suddenly in their mother's arms. And this is a phenomena so rare that a prosecution witness, not one of Detective Grus's witnesses, but a prosecution in investigating over 500 unexplained and sudden infant deaths, he had only seen one time when the child had died in its mother. Detective Grus, in a matter of a few weeks, we had two Ottawa babies die in their mother's arms. That's just, the odds are astronomical. It's not going to happen. So she started looking into it, and she's a seasoned investigator. And she notified the chief and the deputy chief, and she notified them of the Pfizer documents and the fact that, for instance, in 31 of 32 unintended pregnancies in the clinical trials, 31 babies did not survive.
Yeah.
They self-aborted.
Well, yeah, obviously
And,
something's wrong.
and this
Yeah.
is back in 2021, 22 that this was known. I mean, here we are 3 years later, and these vaccines harms and deaths. So including with children in the womb. So she looked into this and support her investigation. The Ottawa police shut it down and they suspended her on February 4th, 2022. They seized her memo books, they seized her laptop, her phone, and they ordered her not to continue the investigation.
Now, before they did that, Donald, didn't she go to the chief of police at the time, Chief Slowly, and the deputy chief, and advise
She
them
wa-
that she was
Yes,
conducting an
she had two
investigation?
meetings, one in December and one in January of 2022. And she also advised the regimental sergeant major, who is really the top non-commissioned officer in the police service. And he thought she was doing a good job. He actually testified in her defense, one of the defense witnesses.
Okay, that's very telling. Then then we just a heads up, your signal is coming through a little bit broken, Donald. So I don't know if there's anything you can do on your end to alleviate that, but just a heads up on that. But back to the investigation.
Okay.
She was suspended. She was suspended, and okay, fine. Then everything is still in house. But all of a sudden, this whole situation broke out into the public and in a big way. What happened there?
Well, one thing happened before it broke in the public was on February 17th and 18th, 2022, the Ottawa Police illegally wiretapped Detective Grus and her
Oh,
family
oh,
using the urgent emergency terrorism provisions of the criminal code.
that is unbelievable. I mean, something like that is only, I would imagine if the nation was in dire straits of an imminent terrorist attack or something. That can't
It-
be that can't be legal.
no, no, I don't think it's legal,
No.
but they did it. And they are refusing to give her the information that they used to obtain that authorization.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
This sets us off on another track, and I don't think we want to go down there immediately because we still need to understand how this thing broke into the public and became the cause celeb that it did amongst all police forces.
So an internal investigation was proceeding. And as with any investigation, there's a plan. And I don't know what their plan was, but I can imagine, having done many investigations, you want to get all your ducks in a row. You want to first of all seize any evidence that might be interrupted, or it might get lost, or it might be changed. And they did that. They seized her police computer, memo book, everything like that. They went through the police records management system and looked for traces of where she had been and what she had looked at, and they did all that. And then they started lining up the witnesses that they were going to connect with. And this was some of her, we found out later, it was some of her own comrades in the squad who had reported her. And I can speculate why they reported her, because she had these 9 sudden infant deaths, which were normal. And she had looked into them, and she had found in a number of cases that they were not investigated. Matter of fact, the officers and the coroners failed to ask the parents if they or the child had received vaccinations. Now, Russ, that's standard. I've investigated homicides and child deaths, and that right back into the 80s. That's one of the things you do. You want to know, has the infant received any vaccinations? Is
Mhm.
there any medicine that they're on? Same with the parents. I mean, it's just what you do. That had not been asked. So these investigations were faulty. They were not well done.
Well,
They were
you would think
substandard.
that even a homicide
And
investigation, you'd want to take a look at the medical background of the person who was deceased to make sure there wasn't some other natural cause involved. It would just be a matter of course for a police investigation to go down that road.
it's just one of the first, exactly, it's one of the first 10 steps in any homicide investigation or sudden death investigation. What could have caused it? Are there any pills around? Did they have any injections? Did they have any recent medical treatments? Just standard stuff.
Now, this she
But it
was
was not,
charged,
not well done.
Donald. She was charged, suspended, and now investigated and the charge, I believe, was discreditable conduct.
Yes.
I just don't understand this. How could it be discreditable for a police officer to initiate an investigation? Doesn't a police officer have the ability, by their terms of reference, to initiate an investigation on their own, uh, with their own suspicions in mind?
Absolutely. This is the way we have set up policing in Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States, where we give police officers great autonomy to investigate anything they want under the law and their oath of office. They can do whatever they want. And we've set it up that way to prevent uh, outside interests from corrupting or influencing individual officers and policing organizations. But
Okay.
that's exactly what happened here. First of all, when the officers complained about Detective Grus, she was suspended. The investigation was going to go on. There was a plan. That part of the plan may have been talking to the parents of the 9 infants. This was an internal thing. So somebody, 2 rogue police officers, and we think we know who one is, went to the CBC to a reporter called Shamini Yogaratnam,
Mhm.
and they revealed criminally the details of the ongoing investigation by Detective Grus, the families, what had happened, the fact that Detective Grus had been suspended. They revealed all of that to this reporter illegally. It was a criminal offense for them to do that.
Yeah, they broke confidence is what they did.
Oh, they did more than that. They did much more than that. They obstructed police. They
Oh,
obstructed a
okay.
police investigation. They obstructed justice.
Mhm.
Um, there's much more than just the violation of their oath and some police act charges. Oh no, this was criminal.
Okay.
So they did that. And then what happened is the CBC and this reporter went to the Ottawa police and said, "We have this story." And they gave the Ottawa police an ultimatum. You have 24 hours before you publish it. Oh, by the way, have you told the parents that this terrible violation of privacy of theirs has happened?
Wow. Mhm.
So they basically, the CBC took over the police investigation from the Ottawa police, and
Okay.
they determined what was going to happen, when, and so the Ottawa Police Professional Standards started phoning the parents. And as a matter of fact, two of the parents that they phoned, uh, the family members came and testified for Detective Grus. They thought
Yes,
that what she did was looking into their deaths was a good thing. So they testified for her. And
yeah,
none
they
of the
wanted to get
parents
to the bottom.
test,
They wanted to get to the bottom of the deaths of their newborn babies. Yes.
that's right.
Understandable.
And none of the parents testified against her.
Okay.
So when that happened, well, the police sort of went crazy on that. And as a matter of fact, when Detective Grus was rolled in for an interview on May 12th, 2022, they told her the reason she was being charged and her conduct was discreditable was because the CBC published these two articles and did a radio show.
Catch 22. You get
That's right.
squealed on and then you get the blame for it. Oh, boy.
That's right. So it wasn't Detective Grus. And the CBC articles, they were wrong. They were defamatory. They called her rogue. They said that she looked into the coroner's reports. It came out in evidence. She did not.
Okay.
And the two of the families came and testified that they were very happy with what she had done and what she was doing.
Well, it's almost as
And
though there's some sort of agenda in play here. This kind of yellow journalism isn't put out there in play for no reason. I say that because I know there's other inconsistencies in the conduct of the proceedings against Detective Grus. I believe I saw somewhere where she wanted to bring in 5 expert witnesses in her
that's right.
defense to talk about the vaccine and scientific data that showed that there was some connection between the deaths of newborns. And I believe she was disallowed. She could not bring her witnesses to the proceedings. Is that true?
It's true. The entire thing is a kangaroo court. It really is. There have been such acts of misconduct, even criminal misconduct, by the prosecution and the professional standards units that if she's convicted, it's certainly going to go to a higher court, and I can't see the
I think she'd be well within her rights to apply
conviction
for a judicial
standing.
review.
But
Yeah.
there's something which is the Canada. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But you see, the process is the punishment. If she's convicted here at this tribunal, she doesn't get to ask for a judicial review. She has to go to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission and spend another $400,000. And
Oh,
only
okay.
then can she ask
Okay.
for a judicial review.
Oh, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the public, yeah, I know. So early on, I discovered, and I wrote an article about this. It's all on my website. I have a listing for all the articles and coverage I've given to Detective Grus right up at the top. My website is donaldbest.ca,
Yes.
donaldbest.ca.
Yeah.
And I discovered early on that in March of 2022, really in the early days, uh, personnel from the Public Health Agency of Canada contacted the Ottawa Police, influenced and sought to influence the conduct of the investigation and the prosecution against Detective Grus.
Okay, this is
I have,
interesting. Now we have kind of a link established here between the case, the disreputable conduct case of Detective Grus and a national agency in the form of Public Health Canada, which was rolling
it's,
out the vaccines.
oh, it's very sad because what it's all about is I saw in, I think it was September of 2022 at one of the initial court hearings, I saw that the Public Health Agency of Canada and a certain doctor was there monitoring the online. And I thought, why is they monitoring the online trial of this detective?
Oh,
So I phoned up the doctor, and then the doctor's daughter phoned me. And it's a sad situation. I recorded every bit of it. It's all on my website. It turned out that the doctor is part of the Public Health Agency of Canada and part of the team that rolled out the COVID vaccine. And it turns out that her granddaughter was one of the 9 infants who died unexpectedly. So we
okay,
have,
okay,
yeah. So we have we have a sad situation there, but it's also a situation where, and the mother called me, and she's a lawyer. It's all there, and she was absolutely livid that I would even uh, discuss it, and she called me all sorts of names and called Detective Grus all sorts of names.
okay.
Of course, she had been told by the CBC that Detective Grus looked at the medical records at the coroners, and Detective Grus had not done so.
Okay. No,
So
I'm
she was
just
programmed by the CBC to just uh, be very
oh,
hostile. Yeah.
okay. So we're beginning to see. We have hands in this pie here. We have the CBC working assiduously against Detective Grus. We have Public Health Canada, which seems to have a stake in the proceedings here, is very interested in the proceedings. I'm going to throw in a couple of more dots here, and maybe we can do some connecting. I don't know, but a little while ago, I had a freelance medical auditor on an in hot session. Her name was Natasha Gonick, and she was looking into the Edmonton Police Service, and she through Freedom of Information Act, she got thousands of pages from the Edmonton Police Service. And out of this, all this information, what she distilled was the fact that uh, the the leaders of the Edmonton Police Service had actually known that there was a possibility that there were adverse effects and adverse events that could come about as a result of the vaccines, but they made the vaccines mandatory for their police constables anyway. That seems really odd to me. Why would a police service, the leaders of a police service, come down with that kind of decision? Another dot. I have a military background, so I follow the military fairly closely. And I note that in the military, the chief of defense staff was advised by, at that time, it was a him, General Eyre, was advised by his legal staff not to go anywhere near a mandatory vaccine rollout because it basically was voided charter rights and was very problematic from a legal standpoint. But he went ahead anyway. So we have all these things happening here with regards to the vaccines that make it all very unusual that these things would be mandated, given the information that was on the table and readily evident.
And of course, that's compounded by the fact that everybody, the police, management, Public Health Agency of Canada, politicians said it was safe and effective.
Yes,
When in
yes.
fact, the manufacturers and many officials knew it was neither safe nor effective. I mean,
I
this is
don't think
well
it's a great
documented.
I don't think it's a great leap here, Donald, to say that the authorities did know that it wasn't safe and effective, or that at the very least you couldn't call it safe and effective given the evidence they had at hand. And so this really speaks to something else that is
And of course, the people who were told to take this and mandated it, who had to take it, they were not told what the adverse effects were. They were not told the adverse effects were possible. They were
no.
not told what happened in the clinical trials. I mean, let's not forget, we hanged people at Nuremberg for exactly what these people did.
I think you're talking about informed consent, the fact that
I am.
nobody was given the information they needed to make a definitive decision on behalf of, in this case, newborn children, their newborn children. And that is absolutely incredible. And I think, quite
Uh,
frankly, I think the wrong person is under investigation here, really.
Oh, absolutely. And it gets even worse. I mean, Detective Grus briefed the chief and deputy chief and other officers in December and January about the adverse effects and about the infants. Um, and they took no action. As a matter of fact, they mandated it for all employees. And then Detective Grus, I mean, she had collected an incredible amount of evidence. We heard this. We heard this at the trial, and it was all in electronic form on a memory stick or RAM stick.
Yeah.
And on May 12th, she turned over her entire investigation, all the evidence, to Sergeant Arbuthnot, who was in charge of the case against her at professional standards. And they took that evidence and they put it in a drawer and never did an investigation. Now, don't forget the police, the chief of police and the higher ups ordered Detective Grus's investigation be stopped. It was never brought again, even with all this evidence. Now, to me, that is neglect of duty under the Police Act. But I think we're starting to see where many people, many people, myself included, are seeing criminal charges here, criminal negligence causing bodily harm and death. These people knew when they mandated this. These people knew when they manufactured it and bought it and distributed it. They knew that there was bodily harm and death, and they covered it up. And that's criminals.
Isn't
Yep.
there something called on the criminal law books something called depraved conduct, or is that a term that rings?
Don't think I've heard of that. But I mean, we have criminal negligence causing bodily harm and death. We have fraud. We know now that the emergency drug that was approved under emergency and ordered was not the one that governments received. In other words, one certain process was used to create the COVID vaccine, created a certain COVID vaccine, and the government's ordered that. But when it came, it was a different one, and no one was told.
Yeah.
I mean, this is criminal. This is
No.
absolutely criminal.
No, now
So,
it's out in the open now that the vaccines actually contain foreign DNA, some of which could be extremely harmful and cancer causing. It goes
and they knew that. They knew it. They
yeah,
knew it. Yeah.
it goes on and on. I would also note that in my recent readings, I think the the prosecution that is taking the case against Detective Grus actually made an admission. I think it was fairly recently that Detective Grus had no right to initiate this investigation because it was of a political nature, and that if you're going to initiate an investigation that has political overtones, well, then you can't do that. You have to go higher. You have to make sure that it's okay.
This is the latest prosecutor. It's number 3. And believe you me, the courtroom was stunned to hear her say that. And she didn't
Yes.
just say that; she went on and on at length. And I mean, this is corruption. This is absolute corruption because once you have uh, police officers unable to initiate investigations against Well, politicians and government people, well, you're into a different system, something like Have Me or places like that in China, where government officials can't be touched. And
Well,
this is what this woman argued.
let's connect some dots again. Let's
Unbelievable.
let's connect some more dots. Does this maybe shed some light on the fact that the RCMP seems incapable of addressing serious Canadian considerations like traitors in Parliament, like investigations against green slush funds. It goes on and on. Are we talking about a Canadian system that has been captured, by some sort of bad evil force?
Well, we have, and I will restrict my comments to law enforcement right now because that's where I'm coming. But I think law enforcement are at the root of this whole problem. You see, law enforcement officers have to be strong. They have to have integrity and they have to have courage to stand up for the rule of law. Because believe you me, when you're a police officer, everybody's coming to you. Don't go to that bar. He's a friend. Leave him alone. Oh, you arrested a drunk driver last week. Well, don't you know that that was so and so's uncle and he gives to the widows and orphans fund? Is there
Yeah.
something you can do? And on it will go. When I was with the squads, we had a chief of police ask us to leave certain licensed premises alone in Toronto, to
Okay.
not to and my my partner, my sergeant at the time, and I spoke about this in my testimony at the National Citizens Inquiry.
Yeah.
He said to the chief, "You can transfer me, you can fire me, but the one thing you cannot do is order me to not do my duty."
Okay.
And it turned out someone else of a lower rank, a superintendent, tried to threaten us too. And Harry threatened to arrest him for obstruct police, and he would have.
Okay. This sounds like these
But
people are
that's all
cut from the
gone
same.
now.
They're cut from the same cloth as Detective Grus. I see.
Well,
I can make that.
that's the way it used to be.
Yeah.
But now we have, for instance, the commissioner of the RCMP, Brenda Lucky, in the middle of the worst homicide mass murder that this country has seen, when the culprit dressed as an RCMP officer down in Nova Scotia and killed all those people.
Yeah.
We had Brenda Lucky, Commissioner Lucky, despicably call them up and ask them to release all the details of the firearms he used because it would help the Liberal government's anti-gun agenda.
Yeah.
Now, when you're in the
I'm-
middle of a homicide investigation, you don't release the weapons because who knows where they came from. You don't want to tell people, you don't want to alert people who maybe supplied these weapons that you're on to them. So Brenda Lucky did that, and thankfully the officers who were there had the integrity and the courage to tell her, basically, if you keep pushing this, you're going to jail. They said it very nicely, but that's what they
Wow.
said, and she backed off.
Wow.
But the fact that the commissioner of the RCMP would interfere with a homicide investigation, right hot, is where we see policing today. And that's
That's
exactly what happened here, I believe, with this Detective Grus case. Has been
Okay.
going on now. It is the most expensive internal prosecution in Ottawa police history. Nothing else comes close. They really want her, and they've told her, they served her with notice, you're going to be fired.
Yeah. It seems like they're really trying to make an example of her, and I think it seems to me though that this whole thing is backfiring because even with all the obfuscation, even with all the hiding of evidence, we're beginning to see a picture here that is not too complimentary for the police service itself. I think this is all backfiring. Where do you see this? Where do you see this thing going?
Well, it's left a trail of careers already in its wake. The inspector for professional standards, who Mr. O'Toole, who brought the charges and such, last January, about a year ago, we heard incredibly from the defense lawyers that he had criminally threatened Detective Grus under the
Okay.
criminal code, that if she testified to certain things and brought certain documents, she would be punished. That's against the criminal code. You can't tamper with a witness. You can't. So anyway, a criminal investigation was demanded, and a few weeks later, he resigned. He's now a lawyer outside of Ottawa doing real estate deals.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that was him. Another prosecutor, who was her last name was Stewart, and it turned out she had carriage of this case for a long time, for a year and a half, and she was sister-in-law to one of the prosecution witnesses.
Okay.
So we had an incredible hearing officer who's not a judge. He has no legal training at all. He let that happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This sounds like we're not going to see the end of it. Are we wrapping up are these proceedings wrapping up now, or are they in their final stages?
On Tuesday, January 14th, 2025, they will continue. The defense is giving her submissions. Bathsheba Vandenberg is Detective Grus's lawyer. She's giving her submissions. It will be, or it's supposed to be, online and visible. There was an incident in court last Friday. It was supposed to wrap up, but there was no sound system. So they moved it to Tuesday and put it online. So we'll see what happens. I expect some really strong submissions from Ms. Vandenberg, because she's going to, I think, address the prosecutor's statement that Detective Grus should have asked for permission because political people were involved.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, this is kind of the whole nation is going to be interested in that, and what she has to say about that. And I guess in closing, Donald, can you remind our audience where they can find your excellent reportage on this issue?
Yes, they can find it on my website, donaldbest.ca, donaldbest.ca.
Mhm.
And I'm on X, Twitter, donaldbestca, at
Okay,
donaldbestca. Now,
excellent.
Russ, this is probably the most important trial in the last 100 years having to do with policing,
Oh,
because do our police they have to investigate anyone, or does the political class rule and direct police operationally and say, you can't investigate this and you can investigate that? Because that's exactly what's happened here. This is an incredibly important trial for all Canadians, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing, in the legacy bought and paid for media.
no, it seems to be all hanging together. We have a police that is operating now as a Praetorian Guard. We have a media that is the mouthpiece of the political establishment. We are not on the right track, Donald, and I thank you very, very much for the light that you're shedding on this particular case, because, as you say, it is of national importance, and it's something that has to be gotten right, because this is not Canada. I'd like to thank you once again, Donald.
Well, thank you, Russ, and I'm sure we'll talk about this again.
I'm looking forward to it, sir. Thanks again.